2004 Bionicle is a strange year, and I don't like. No, I do like it. I'm just kidding. But there are aspects of it I don't like. Notably, the colors. And this is going to be a bit controversial because I know there are a lot of people who like the darker colors of Bionicle, but of course it was somewhat symptomatic of a tone that would continue further into its development, something that I was not very fond of. But I am the type of person who has a very strong affinity and a nostalgic affinity, let's admit, to the early years of Bionicle. But I did like 2004. I thought it was exploring things that we really hadn't seen, and in most ways, it was a marked improvement on what had come before. The Titans left a lot to be desired that year, in my personal opinion, but I think what bothers me the most about that year, a lot of people like to display their Bionicle collection on shelves, often separated by the year they were released. And fair enough, it's a good way to do it. It's quite simple to understand, and it looks great on a shelf. You look at 2001, 2, and 3, and you see a wonderful world of colors, not just colors associated with their elements, but primary, secondary, and tertiary colors in these groups as well. 2002 would, I guess, be a little more bland than other years, but even that is no small feat. There were so many colors in each of these 3 years. It's hard to pick out a top contender, if you will. Which is why it's so sad to see a year like 2004 where the most colorful set you get is Kreka. And you have to look at Kreka or Krika, however it is pronounced. No, I'm not going to look that up. But when you have to look at that set as your colorful set, it seems like an issue. As you can tell, I'm not a particular fan of the set itself. It does have some very strange functions. It didn't really seem like LEGO knew what they were doing when they made it. It looks cool, sure, and there are some neat aspects to it, but in all ways, it feels like a worse version of the Makuta set that came before. And although it does try to incorporate some really interesting mechanisms, it does so in a way that feels weird. A shoulder-mounted gun blaster that folds back and folds up is cool, but it's not as cool on that character. When you had something like the Exotoa before, where the head folded back for a specific reason, in this case here, it's just storage, I guess, but it's taller when it's in the back. So what is it being stored for? Whatever, right? Hit my microphone. And then you've got other sets like Nadiki and Nevok, which are both great sets. Nevok also taking some inspiration from the Exotoa, allowing for the Metromatoran to ride inside. And I think that that's a wonderful proposition. It's different and it's unique. But at the end of the day, when you put 2004 on a shelf, it's muddy. One of the reasons I don't have that year displayed outside of not owning all of the sets from then is because it's not the most exciting thing to look at. Many of the sets are bogged down, held down, weighed down by their reliance on dark bluish gray. A year after we got the Rockshi sets, which heavily used dark gray as well, which granted made sense for the Rockshi. Clearly it was a way for LEGO to save money since the Rockshi did introduce a decent handful of new parts and quite an interesting building scheme on top of that. With the Rockshi, it made sense because at the very least, the Makuta set used that dark gray quite heavily as well, and being sons of the Makuta, it did make them feel bonded in some way. I would have loved to have seen, and in fact, I often go back to modify my Rockshi to change the color of the sockets in those sets to a secondary color, just to add a little splash of something extra. And I recommend it. But with 2004, although you can do the same and add a splash of color to the sockets, it feels forced in some ways. Not in a bad way. I do think that the sets look better. Hell, you can see Nuju sitting back there with his medium blue, which I think looks wonderful on him. In fact, I think that version of him looks absolutely superior. Superior? Super? I don't know if I want to say it's necessarily better than the set version. And the reason I display Nuju quite proudly, I was going to say Nuvu. I don't know what that even... Anyway... The reason I display him as proudly as I do is because he is my favorite Toa Metru set. It took me a long time to come to this realization, but he also doesn't suffer from those dark colors in the same way. I think that white and dark gray are a good pairing, if not muted, if not a bit bland, and of course utilized again the year earlier with the Kopiki set. He still wears it well. And at the very least, he's not darkened by that Metru touch, if you want to call it that. All of the sets from Metru Nui either stay the same color or get darker, with the exception of Oniwa. And let's be honest, Metru Brown, it's not my favorite color in the world. It's a fine color, but I don't think I've ever looked at something and said, man, that could be improved in Metru Brown, you know? but it's a fun color to utilize when you do it. I have built Rahi with the color. I'm all over the place with my words today. At the end of the day, though, it bothers me because this feels like an issue LEGO should have seen, and I say issue again as though they saw it as such, but I don't believe they did. In one way, you could see it as tying the sets together, much as the same as the black sockets on the Toa Mata and Toa Nuva, but I don't see it that way. Again, at the end of the day, it's clear that this was a strategic choice for LEGO to reduce the price of these sets going in, which makes sense. The Toa Metru have a lot of brand new pieces. I was going to say McDonald's Matoran. That's not right either. The Metru Matoran, same thing there as well. Easily could have used the Borak limbs, but LEGO designed a brand new limb for them, which was criminally not recolored for a very long time and only came in one other color from LEGO, being dark green, which apparently not a lot of people know about because it's in one Vikings set. And so it's always funny to me because you go to 2005 hoping that they would learn their lesson. And depending on where you lived in the world, they did. Because as far as I've heard, and I can't confirm this living in the United States, the Visorak and the Hordika were released at the same time, but in different parts of the world. So where I believe we got the Hordika first, but don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. I could absolutely be misremembering this. Other countries got the Visorak, and then it swapped. I'm not positive of that, but I have read that. The Visorak rectified this problem for me. One of the reasons that I like the Visorak as much as I do, outside of their function being different from really anything we'd seen before, and though a very specialized function, they look quite good. They sort of forego the sameness of the Vaki sets, and of course add that color as well. The Vaki to me were kind of a letdown, to be honest, not having a mask of any type, which sure you can write off in the story as them being robots, but also it meant that LEGO didn't have to produce a new mask mold for each of these sets. Again, understandably so, these sets were also very clearly made or designed around parts that already existed because LEGO blew the budget, if you want to think of it that way, or at the very least was trying to sort of reel in what they were spending on Bionicle. And fair enough, but I think Bionicle is, at its heart, a theme you have to invest in. You have to take risks in that theme to keep it from going stale. And, well, it did after a while. I hear 100 arguments talking about the Anika build. And though I've created videos defending it, I don't think it's perfect, and I do believe it is something that needed to change and evolve over time. I was happy to see the sets that came out in 2015 Bionicle because they were something at the least different from CCBS, even if they still were CCBS at the end of the day. And I thought they did a pretty good job designing those sets as well. But 2004, to me, in some ways, is sort of the, I want to say precursor to what felt like a sort of downfall, which I think is an alienation of what Bionicle is, because I don't believe it's the case. But at the very least, it's a shift in focus of the theme, as we would see in 2006 when Bionicle would eventually just get rid of functionality entirely. And that's not to say that functions are the most important thing, because not everybody derives their satisfaction of owning a Bionicle set out of the functionality of that set. But as myself, as someone who can speak as a builder of Rahi, of things focused around mechanisms, I love that kind of stuff. And so I put a little extra weight in that. 2005, though, clearly was where things really went downhill. And I think that's true for LEGO as well. I think they realized it with Bionicle because things shifted quite quickly in 2006, obviously going to more of an edgy aesthetic. If they hadn't fully committed before with the darker colors, they did by this point with, bands like the All-American Rejects. And I thought that was lovely, but at the time I didn't really care for it. I've grown to kind of adore that era of Bionicle as well for its own reasons, the same way that I adore sets like Gadunka now when I hated them as a kid, or sets like Firo and Skirmix, a big dinosaur. As a kid, I did not like that idea, but now I love it. 2004, 2005 had their flaws, but they were good years. They were just the end of an era. And I think it's an era that Bionicle and LEGO themselves have failed to recapture in most of the attempts that they have tried. 2015, I will say, for the record, for what it's worth, did get close. Not perfect. And nowhere near, because I think Bionicle at its peak was a stratospheric high. It's incredibly hard to recapture that. And it's not a franchise with the staying power of something like Pokemon, which was also popular around the same time, a few years earlier, of course. But it is, at the end of the day, at its heart, based on something that could have that potential as a building theme. To have seen something like 2009 take the strides that it did, only for LEGO to really pull the wool over your eyes. That's not the right. I'm so bad at these phrases. You get the point I'm trying to make, right? 2009 had a lot of potential, and LEGO sort of tainted it by shoving in all of these things that didn't need to be there for a quick solution, a quick end to the Bionicle story. And it makes sense to some degrees. At some point before 2009, I believe LEGO knew that they were going to be canceling Bionicle, and I don't know when the designers found out about it, but I imagine it had been in the books for at least a year or two for LEGO, and probably around the same time as sockets started breaking, since this was a theme, well, dedicated to them. 2015 had the same feeling to it, like it could have been another 2009. I don't think it would have ever reached the same highs as Bionicle proper, as its 2001 through 2003 counterpart, but I do think it had a lot of potential to be its own thing, but LEGO was never quite brave enough to do it. And it's funny to say that, because I look at sets from the Star Wars CCBS line, which were getting new parts constantly, not just new armor types, but new bodies and complex and interesting builds on top of that as well. But LEGO wasn't brave enough to do that with Bionicle. At the end of the day, as cool as I think the 2015 master sets look, they're not really groundbreaking outside of adding the gearbox, which is cool in and of itself. But if you really want to think about it, it just moves the ball joints from the body to something that moves. Awesome to add the function in, but what else does it do? I think it's fine on its own, and it absolutely justifies the wave. But LEGO, I think, thought the same thing as well. 2016, obviously, they added the torso with its waist movement instead and built these sets around that. But it was clear at this point they didn't really have an idea what they were doing with it. They thought it was a neat concept to have a new function again with that waist movement left to right, which always bored me, but that's fine. We all have different tastes. But in some cases, the weapons weren't designed for this feature. Sure, you could say some of them got staff-like weapons, but they always felt empty. Already, a year into this brand new theme, and it really felt like LEGO was grasping at straws. There were still some fantastic concepts, some wonderful color combinations, but each set felt tainted by something I have yet to be able to describe. And I do hope to do a video really deep diving into my issues with the Uniter sets as a whole, because I know I'm not the only person to dislike them, though I do think that they have some interesting features and characteristics to them. There are aspects to all Bionicle sets that I do like, and all waves that I think are valuable, that we can take from and learn from. But to this day, I've never really seen LEGO capture that same spark from 2001. And it's hard. It's a tall order. But they have tried. And I can admire some of their, well, I would say, honestly, at the very least, all of their attempts that I have seen. I bought a set a handful of years ago from Ninjago called the Thunder Keeper's Village. And I loved that set. I bought it because it was an island-themed set from Ninjago, sure, in some ways, I don't want to say replacement, but a spiritual successor in several ways to the idea of what Bionicle was. It's its own thing as well, and I don't mean to diminish that or the fans of Ninjago by saying that, because I think it is a lovely theme. It has had staying power far more in a lot of cases than Bionicle, and it makes sense. But at the end of the day, that set, outside of that Ninjago theme, was an island that I didn't know about. I didn't look up reviews for this set. I saw it one time, I think, in, I don't know, a forum or something I was in. I said, that one that's got something. There's something to it. It's a fairly straightforward set. It has a little bit of sort of like a, I don't want to say gameplay feature, but you can tell that it was taking some inspiration from some things that LEGO had tried in previous years, and I liked that. But there was a magic to that set as well. I still have it. I still have aspects of it. The totems that come in that set that split apart and break down, which I love, I still have them built. I've never taken them apart because they're lovely little creations. I wasn't intending for this video to go here, but the point I'm trying to make is that Bionicle in and of itself is not some magic unattainable thing. It in some ways lives on in all of us. We know that. It's silly to say, it's kind of cringe, but it is also true because we define what it is. That's what I was hinting at when I said it can't necessarily be something like Pokemon. And I mentioned Pokemon because it's somewhat endless in a way, right? There's always new things that can come up every season. What do I want to call that? But it's also something I was heavily into as a kid. And Bionicle lends itself to that kind of feature well because it's buildable, because it's an insert your character, your person here type of media. And we don't get many of those. I think the other cool thing about it is that it's not LEGO. I mean, it is. Sure, it's made by LEGO. It's compatible with many LEGO pieces, but it's its own thing. And it's beautiful in that way. So that's pretty much it for this video. Definitely went on about twice as long as I had intended for it to, but hey, I had a lot to say, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this one as well. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel, and of course, it's chilly here, so try to stay warm. Hopefully you guys are warm wherever you are. As always, if you want to join in on the conversation, make sure to check out the Discord, Instagram, or Patreon if you want to support the channel and get some perks in the description below, and of course, you can always leave a comment on this video letting me know your thoughts, where you agree, where you disagree. And I'd like to know, have you ever displayed your 2004 Bionicle sets? Have you ever felt bad about doing it? No. They're good sets. Anyway, take care.